Good morning. We'd like to welcome you to the BmoreNews Morning Show. We have with us the one and only Kavette Minor Kane. Good morning, Kavette.
Good morning, Donnie. How are you guys doing today?
Outstanding. Blessed by the best. J. Wyndal Gordon, the warrior lawyer.
Yes, sir. Good morning. How's everybody this morning?
Good. And we have Will Hanna. Hey, Will Hanna.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good to see my friends in studio.
So, Kavette, what's been happening in your world?
Well, I spent a really nice morning listening to the what was the name of it? The downtown download over in Baltimore. Senator Van Halen was there this morning. He shared some insights on some of the things that'll be coming up in Congress after our inauguration tomorrow.
Okay. That's Senator Van Halen.
Uh-huh.
Sound like the dog endorses that message.
Hey, Pharaoh.
We just been photobombed. Handle this for me. I got a knock at the door, Kavette. But
Okay.
we want to find out what's happening in Will Hanna's world.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Hanna. How are you doing today? What's going on in your world?
Oh, what's going on in my world? Well, a lot. I'm happy to announce that I've become one of the only black minor league pro football team owners in the country.
Congratulations! Yay!
So we're excited about
Celebrate
that.
our
And,
success.
excited about a lot of other projects that we have that's been going on in Park Heights. That's still ongoing. But we're glad that we've been able to help a lot of our young men in the city. We sent 10 guys to college this year through our program. We had one guy that got drafted last year into the NFL, went to the Arizona Cardinals, and we bought the Baltimore Brigade. That you, of course, they used to play at the Royal Farms Arena, so we bought that franchise as well. We have another franchise that we're purchasing in West Virginia.
Awesome.
So we're excited.
Yes, that is exciting. Congratulations. Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah. So what led you to an interest in the minor league baseball?
Well, baseball. This is football. I didn't announce the baseball team, but we actually just got a contract with the African American Baseball League. It's a pro developmental baseball league. So we got a 10-year contract, and now the Baltimore Cardinals will start playing in 2022. So I didn't get to announce it, but I'm glad you led me in with that. But I've always had an interest in sports and sports and entertainment for years. I worked at Columbia Records and at Rockefeller Records for years, and sports and entertainment was always my bread and butter. Even though a lot of people know me from doing community work and all of that in Park Heights, but this has always been my thing. I played football, played at Morgan 1 year before I got injured, and then got deployed to Desert Storm. So it's always been my thing. But the biggest thing was about how we had to draw young men into something positive, especially in Baltimore. It's how we had to draw them to something positive and then kind of lead them another way. So we used football as a draw, but then it became something that we were able to elevate them with.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because my next question was going to be, what is your intention with these projects? You obviously are, community focused, and you've had a lot of experience working over there in Park Heights. So what is your intention with drawing these young men out of the community, whether they're able to get drafted or not? What would you like for them to achieve by working with you?
That's a great question. I think the biggest thing is we want them to achieve some sense of accomplishment, and some of these young men have not experienced that. And the thing is, whether it's in sports, we had to find a way to do something positive for our young men in Baltimore, whether it's sports, whether it's community development, whether it's rehabbing houses, no matter what it is. So this was just another avenue to accomplish, to get to that end. And these young guys, what I tell a lot of people is the misconception around a lot of these young men is you never know their story until you talk to them. And a lot of these guys they're not bad kids. They're just kids, but they're not all of them. And say not all of them. They're not all bad kids. And I think there's a misconception that a lot of there's some bad ones. Jay, but they're not bad kids. So until we talk to them and until we engage them, until we find out where the root cause of their issues are, then we're going to constantly get into this system of processing these young men through the criminal justice system versus we trying to preempt, we're doing preemptive strikes now. I'm a military guy, so we do preemptive strikes.
Well, let's get to the heart of the matter. What is the issue with our young men?
I think the biggest issue is that they and I'll be brutally honest, that a lot of the men in my age group, and I'll say in our age group, failed them over decades. And I'll say that ever from the 80s all the way up to present day, there are some systematic injustices that have failed them, but there are also some of us that have failed them as well. And
so let me slide over to you, Jay. What is the issue with our young men? Why do we have murder as the topic du jour every single day of the year?
Well, it's a multifaceted issue. It's not just one. They're angry. That's what I gather from my practice. These men have an incredible amount of anger inside, and the anger is caused by multiple different factors. But just when these young men were growing up, I will say that there were a lot of people fighting to see their children and just being hurt all the time. And sometimes, I'm gonna speak the truth. I don't care who jumps on me. Sometimes the mothers weren't allowing these fathers to be a part of their children's lives, or every time they try, they get locked up.
Right. Yeah.
And fathers just got frustrated and threw up their hands. But I'm not saying that's the majority of the times, but I have heard those stories as well.
Jay, wonder why would a mother stop a child from seeing their father? I mean,
money,
sure, a molester or somebody that's physically.
Why are you asking him? Why don't you ask the mother?
That's right. But
because I'm interviewing.
Okay. So I've seen money as an issue. I've seen that the child's mother wants to be a part of, wants the family, and the father doesn't want the family situation with the mother, but wants to be a father to his child. I've just seen those stories, and I'm not saying that that's the majority of the stories, but I remember hearing those stories when these young people were young, but they're angry for multiple reasons. And Cavett, definitely take it away.
Well, okay. You are a lawyer, so that means that you've been over to central booking and to other facilities, holding these young men.
Right.
Can you tell me a little more of the mindset of someone who picks up a gun? Hey, Will Hanna, you got to leave the phone alone. We hear every time you touch it. Step away from the computer. But when you go over to the bookings and you got a young man in there charged with murder, what is the mindset?
The mindset, oh man, shoot. Let's go to gaming. Gaming has a huge influence on young people. I remember going over to central bookings, the juvenile intake facility, and meeting with a young man who was charged with double murder. And there was a videotape, and there was a young man in the videotape, and just keeping this thing as vague and ambiguous as I can, that appeared to be of similar description of my guy. And my guy, if you watch that video, it was horrific. And my guy talked to me about the murders in Baltimore City, talked to me about having murdered in Baltimore City multiple people. And it comes from him feeling disrespected by someone, and he'd hold this anger inside for years, just waiting for the right opportunity. And he says that there are more out there like them. In fact, he sat down, he looked at me, he said, "You look like a killer." He said, "I look like a killer." He said, "You'll kill somebody." He looked at me with one of those Silence of the Lamb moments with Hannibal. It was one of those moments that I had with this. It was an eerie feeling. And he says, I know you would. I know you would. And I was like, well, I wouldn't kill unless I was about to be killed. He said, "Nah, you're a killer." He said, "I could see it." And he says, "I've done some things." And without going into details, he explained them to me. And what he talked about would actually amount to 5% of the murder rate at that time, considering the fact that we had over 300, and let's say 10% is what, 30% is 30. So 5% would be like 15 that, or somewhere in there that he could probably take credit for. And he says others out there like them. So these young people, man, they got a lot of anger. They're not playing, and they will unload. And we're just seeing it on the streets. And I don't know what it's going to take. Will Cavett, I'd be open to listen to what you all would say. I just see the manifestations of the problem. When they get to me, it's almost too late unless I can, work it out and get them another opportunity to return to the streets. And they've changed their entire mindset. But when they're still young, it's you can't really say.
Yeah. I know for me, from the perspective of a mother, and I look from two perspectives because I'm the daughter of a mother who actually was a single mom. And then I personally worked to make sure that my children, because I didn't have a relationship with my own father, I worked to make sure that my children, who are both boys, did have relationships with their fathers and maintain the connection with them. I know that for myself, not having the exposure to my father, I lost a lot. I was lost for a lot of my life. There were so many things. There's questions that come up, and there's the influence of your dad that you can't substitute that with anything. You can't even substitute that.
What would make a mother push the father and the child away from each other?
Two things. Either she is angry and wants to take revenge, or she is afraid and wants to protect the child. So from either one of those ends, and the spectrum in between is what would keep her from allowing her child to have access to, their dad at a young age. But then understand as well that child is only, going to be under her rule or under her reign for 18 years. And once that child gets to be 18 and starts to put together his own mind or her own mind and begins to understand real life and have real life experiences, they're going to search for that influence. They're going to search for that encouragement from their father, and then being able to make that connection is something that they'll search for.
Well, Hannah, you grew up down Murphy Homes.
He's on mute.
You're muted. Yeah, there you go.
So, yeah, I grew up down Murphy Homes. I was born and raised in Murphy Homes and moved to Lexington Terrace. And then we thought we got a couple of dollars and moved to Park Heights, not knowing that Park Heights was what it was. But I can tell you that as a father I was one of those fathers that was kept away from his children for a few years. And to your question, Donnie, in my situation, the reason was because, one, it was either because of money, or it was because of me being in another relationship, and they didn't want the child being around the new girlfriend or new wife. And a lot of time it's just being vindictive, not knowing the long-term effects that it has on that child. And I don't think they see that when the child is 9 or 10 years old, but those children grow up to be 22 and 23, and they remember. Yeah. They remember you not being there. They thought you weren't there because that's what they were told. They didn't know the attempt that you made to be there. All they know is that they were told they didn't see you. And so it does have lasting. I have children. I have my oldest son had lasting effect on him until recently, and he's 27. So I think a lot of times the mothers don't know, and they think they're protecting the child, but they don't even know what they're protecting the child from. Mm-hmm. It's not an economic situation. It's not a fearful situation. It's just a matter of a lot of it is just being vindictive. To say that honestly.
Shout out to all the good mothers. I want to shout out to all the wonderful mothers out there, because I don't want this thing to turn into a battle of the sexes because of something that I had said. There are wonderful, wonderful mothers out there who are doing their job, who try to, get these relationships going between their children and their father. And there are fathers out there who don't take advantage of it and want nothing else to do with those children. So shout out to all the good mothers. This is not a battle of the sexes. And I'm not, I don't think I'm talking about the majority of mothers out here. I think the majority of the mothers are.
You made that clear, Jay Wyndal. But
we just looking on the one end.
It is an issue. It is an issue that we have to pull together. We have to heal. Kavette?
And it can also backfire. I mean, you think about, I know of a situation where, similar to you, Mr. Hanna, where the gentleman was kept away from his child and the mother told the child, oh, your dad is bad and this and that and the other and all of these rumors. And he kept hearing about his dad from people in the neighborhood because they were, in Baltimore was small, everybody Baltimore. And so him hearing about his dad from these outsiders saying, no, you saying that about your dad, you can't talk about him around me like that because I know him, and that was the thing that sparked his interest, causing him to reach out to his dad. And now they have an amazing relationship. There's a lot that he has to learn and that his father is not making up for, but contributing to in terms of influence and training, teaching him to be a man. There's some mistakes that he made that had he had the influence of his father, they would have been avoided.
Sorry to cut you, Kavette. So, Jay Wyndal, when we talk about years later, this young man, his dad hadn't been in his life, but now he's over the bookings. You have to serve him for a trial. Do you ever see an instance where the family does come back together? Do you ever see an instance where the healing does take place?
Yeah, I can think of a number of cases because usually when you're down and out and you feel isolated and alone, that's when the father kinds of sometimes reappears. And when he does, it really makes an impression. And once the kid gets out of the situation, I think their relationships are better because of it. I can think of one instance down in Prince George's County where a young man was charged with multiple homicides. And he had always had this relationship with his father that was very, for lack of a better word, tense, almost to the point of acrimony. And I had to tell him, I said, you know who's paying for your defense? I said, it's your father. I said, it wasn't who you thought it was, and I'm not going to cast aspersions on on the other, but it was your father, the one who, is struggling, working night jobs, daytime to make sure that I have the money that I required in order to represent you is him. I didn't get money from any place else. I can tell you that for a fact. And then, we went through the whole trial procedure. We were found, we got acquitted. I mean, these were multiple homicides. And this young man is doing actually very well. But once he was released from the trials of the judicial system, his relationship was restored with his father. And don't you know, a couple of years later, his father passed. And so it was good to see that they actually had that relationship. He's gone on. He graduated from Shaw University, got a master's degree, pledged Kappa, all these things because he had seen me. He pledged Kappa because he saw me during his trial work. I would come to the jail and I had on a shirt that had my brand exposed, and he asked me about it, so I told him about it. But all those years later, yeah, he pledged and he's doing very well, got a child of his own. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And that's one of the lenses that I get, or the views that I get with people who really struggle to become something, some kind of way, despite the odds. I get to see them after we've gone through what we've gone through, because we're bonding too. When you're going through trial with a young man, you're pledging. I mean, we're both pledging. He's dealing with the anxiety and stress. I'm dealing with the need to win in order to give this young man, who I believe in, another opportunity. And when we get out, like all my people, they all, happy birthday. We're doing good. They send me pictures of what they're doing now. I mean, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I got one who's a park police, one who's a fireman, this one who's works in finance. I mean, I got legions and legions of people who are doing great things because we had an opportunity to free them from what was trying to hold them down.
Jay Wyndal, I don't want to sound old.
Mm-hmm.
But think back to when you were 20 and the music that you listened to.
Mm-hmm.
Think back to when you were 20 or so.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
What are they listening to today?
Every generation says that their music was better. They listen to the same crap that our parents criticized us for listening to, except this is a whole lot worse. Like, we listen to music, man, that said, I'll pay your rent. I think the stars in the mountains. They listen to music that say, I'll give you some D. You know what I mean? It's crazy, man. But, hey,
Kavette, what is up with the music today?
Well, we gotta understand how influential music is. And it is the responsibility of, I always say, each individual to choose for themselves what they're going to be influenced by. So you can find music that has, a nice storyline, something that's encouraging and loving, or you can go trap. And it's like there is a big difference.
And I like some trap.
I know, but I'm just saying, when you hear that word, you know what to expect. It is setting a mindset. It is what are we encouraging ourselves with? What are we allowing ourselves to be influenced by? Because long after we turn that music off, the lyrics are going to continue to play in our heads.
Kavette, I'm asking, what is that the essence of the lyric?
It is the emotion, the feeling, and it's for us, and especially for me as an emotional intelligence practitioner, I work with my clients in helping them to understand being conscious about how they feel and what they say and what they do and what other people say and what
are they saying, Kavette?
Say it again.
What are they saying?
What are they saying? Oh, they're talking about sex and they're talking about either, just not, but it's not a loving sex. It's a casual sex. It's you don't mean nothing, but let me get that. And then I'm going to hit that. And then I'm going to move on, and next, and it's like, okay, but that doesn't give you the foundation of feeling loved and embraced and, that stability of being able to grow and move forward with someone. What everybody wants is love, peace, and happiness, but we want stable relationships which encourage our mental and emotional growth so that we're able to pass that on to our kids. If we don't have it for ourselves, who are we going to pass it on to?
I hear a lot of, I hear misogyny, I hear misandry, I hear violence against each other. I'll never hear them about, going to some other neighborhood and shooting it up or smacking them up, and it's a whole lot of stuff that I think programs some of us. Some of us can recognize the art in it, and other of us cannot detach it from our own reality because it's so reflective of what some of us live on a day-to-day basis. So,
well, Hanna, what's up with the music?
It is. When we were younger, the music we listened to, there was some glorification in it of things that we may have wanted. You saw the guys that had the gold ropes and the dookie chains and the nice cars and all that. This is just further glorification of all the negativity that they see in their neighborhoods, in their everyday walk. So even if it's things that aren't true, but it is what they're expected to say because this is the lifestyle that they're supposed to be living, or what in their mind, what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be tough, and they're supposed to be hard, and they're supposed to be that. And so they glorify that and say, well, I'm selling this amount of drugs, and I got these many cars, and I got this much jewelry, and I got all of these women, and I got all. So that's what they glorify. That's what they see. And a lot of times people know what they know, and they don't know what they don't know. And then, so they go by what they see and what they can glorify to make themselves look bigger than they are. And
this segment of BmoreNews is brought to you by one of our sponsors, BayEd.org. Be sure to check out their website, learn more about the HBCU Homecoming, HBCU Village, and the K-12 Village. Just go to BayEd.org, and that's by Dr. Tyrone Taborn, Black Engineer of the Year Awards. So let's just shift the dialogue a bit.
Let me make this one point, if I may. Can I? Okay. Let me just bring to everyone's attention that the courts have now said that rap lyrics can be used in a criminal trial to convict a person who's charged of certain offenses. If they rapped about it in some of their songs, the courts have now said that information. Now, you never saw something like someone who's charged with producing a movie like Steven Scorsese, or the guy who promotes Steven Spielberg, promotes all these horror films. You never would hear the courts using what happened in his horror films in a trial of his, but rappers are now, their lyrics are now being used. They've been determined to be admissible in certain instances.
You find that to be discriminatory?
I do. I
but
do.
a challenge that there have been some movies that have been noted in cases to have influenced people. So mass shootings and bombings, even.
I'm talking about
Jay Wyndal. You have to also speak to what level of intelligence does a person have to write down what they're guilty of in a song.
This is before the fact. This is before the fact. If they talked about these things, this isn't after the fact. This is before it. So I just want people to be on notice that your lyrics that you use in some of your music can come back to haunt you.
Well, let's go even further. Rappers need to have a lawyer.
Well, yes, indeed. But but are we talking about censoring art? Because this could possibly have a chilling effect on your ability to express yourself if you know, or if it could be possibly turned. And I don't know how far this thing goes. It sounds absurd, but you never know when the cases come down. What sounds absurd today may be very important to a case in the future. So you just have to be mindful of these.
Okay. Jay, what I'm really saying is I don't understand someone who is selling dope who is making a video. I don't understand it. If you're selling dope, don't you want to be like, shh, low key, got a hood on your head, laid back in the gap? Why do you want to be on the screen? You know the police are watching you.
But what if you aren't selling dope, but your lyrics come in to say you sell dope? That's the problem. If, if it's all just an illusion for your audience,
then maybe I shouldn't make a song about selling dope.
And then what do you do to your freedom of speech, your right to express yourself? Do we just let that go?
I think it goes into
all right, Quebec. When I look on these streets of Sandtown and I see a cat standing on the corner talking about selling dope and all of that in front of somebody's house they done paid $60,000 for, I could give a rat's hind parts what happens to him because he don't care about nobody around him.
Until somebody gets you caught up on something that you didn't do, and then use some of your messaging from BmoreNews against you because you said something that was probably indelicate or something to that effect, and they're using it to prosecute you for a charge you didn't commit. How would you feel about that?
But then you have to think about
standing on a damn corner. Hey, look, let me tell you something. Let's go back to our daddies. This is what my daddy said. You got to survive the frisk. That was around 1975, 1980. You got to survive the frisk.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
Don't be dirty.
Man, you don't have to be dirty to be charged with a crime, Donnie. You might be able to guarantee that you may never commit a crime. Donnie, you might be able to guarantee that you may never commit a crime in your life, but you cannot guarantee that you won't be charged with one. So stop acting like this stuff only happens to people who are guilty of doing something.
Right, absolutely. And there's a lot of innocent people.
Whenever you have somebody taking your rights away,
I tell you what, if you up in a library trying to get your education, you have more chances of not being in the bookings as someone does who is standing on a damn corner in the middle of everybody hustling. That's for sure. So it's choices and decisions.
But does that make him guilty of hustling the same? That's where I come in. That's why you need people like me. Because somebody like Donnie is going to say just because you're there, you must be guilty as they are. And
you're standing on the corner every day. What are you doing?
It's your corner, it's your neighborhood. So
go to work.
Donnie, can I make a point real quick?
It's your ass a job.
All right, Donnie. So then, Mr. Hanna, what about the money that is made available to those who are promoting these activities? I mean, we see on a regular basis that these rappers, these new, people coming on the scene with their music and with their art are promoting these activities because of the money that is available behind it.
What's the question?
What about the money? That's the motivation. I mean, if it is motivating this, then how can we have something to change based on the way that these guys are being motivated?
Okay, so let me say this to I think to Jay Wyndal's point and to your point, Donnie. Let's say I'll give you a real world example. That same library you're talking about is the one at Penn North. And these kids that got to walk past is looking to produce this music are walking past everything they see from from Pennsylvania Lawrence all the way up to Penn North. And so they're going into the library to write this music. And everything that they saw is what they're going to write about. And so it doesn't mean that they necessarily were involved in it, or they just saw it and they see it every day. But they're going to the library. They're going to the same library that you're talking about, Donnie. They're just going to write the music. And they're going to write the real world story of what happens in their neighborhood, whether they're involved in it or not. And so I think to Jay Wendell's point, you know how they could just be walking down the street and the police will pull them over just because they were walking down the street and they were in the neighborhood, in the proximity of where some of the criminal activity was.
Are we talking about Baltimore?
And now,
are we talking about Baltimore?
Oh, yes. Every day.
Because since Freddie Gray, I ain't been seeing nobody get pulled over.
But I think you're missing
the point. Freddie Gray,
I know that's not the point, though. I think the point is, yeah.
Since Freddie Gray, I see cats smoking weed in front of the police. That's what I see.
Well, that was because our state legislators allowed that to happen. They passed a law to do that. They allowed that.
Well, that's not.
We knew what was going to happen. There are a lot of us, and Jay Wendell can probably attest to this, and as well as there's a lot of us that probably said that if you allow marijuana to become legal, you're going to have a bigger problem in Baltimore than you anticipated. And that's what we're seeing a lot of that now. A lot of these kids aren't selling coke and dope anymore. They're selling weed now because they can, and because there's no legal ramifications around them doing it. So they can blow smoke in the police face because there's no ramifications.
Don't do it, young men. If you're watching,
less, they good.
Young men, if you're watching this show, do not smoke weed in front of the police.
But Donnie, you missed the point that Will was making, and I think that's really important. Look who came in. So Will was making an excellent point, and I like what you were saying, Will. Could you finish your point? If Donnie would allow, it's Donnie's show, but I love the point.
Well, the only thing I'm saying is that a lot of this is perpetuated by a lot of things that we've allowed over time, and that was my original point. We've done these things, and so now you know how they say chickens come home to roost, right? This is the result of a lot of the things that we've allowed in our communities for decades. Nobody, if I use, and I'm not picking on Penn North, I'm using that as an example because you have a lot of activity there. Even during COVID, nobody ever went in the house. Everybody was still outside during COVID. They're still outside right now. But directly across the street at Penn North from that subway station is a library. And so you have our children, whether it's a school, whether it's a library, whether it's a community center, that we have our children and our young people are in these same neighborhoods where a lot of this activity is being bred. And it's being bred because it was never stopped over time. And so by the time these are what kids are seeing when they're 5 years old. They're seeing people getting killed in the street. They're seeing people high on drugs. They're seeing people with the lean and they don't fall. They're seeing that all up in that. They're seeing that since they're 5 years old. So then when they get 15 and 17, we want to say, why are they acting this way? It's because they've seen this every day in their neighborhood. They've seen vacant houses every day. They've seen drug activity every day. They've seen murders. They've seen people laying in the street dead. They've seen people walking down the street with guns. So this is being promulgated in our own neighborhoods, not by other people. We're doing it. This is being done by us.
And then let's add another factual layer. These kids who walk past this every day go to libraries, as you say, to write this music based upon what they've seen in the community. They walk back home, they get stopped by police, they get charged with some drugs that was found stashed next to somebody's steps on an abandonment. They get charged. They get charged with distribution of cocaine and what have you, and then somebody comes up with their rap lyric and use those lyrics against them in the court of law. That's what I'm talking about, and that was an excellent illustration of how this thing could be used to serve an injustice rather than justice. And I just think that
absolutely. And so, Mr. Hanna, you brought up some really good points too, which talk about how this has been influenced over generation. So then the question is, if we're seeing this as the chickens come to roost, how do we make the correction? How do we now turn back? How do we now, take those young men, and even though we don't own the minor league football or baseball league, how do we encourage them and influence them to make better choices in their lives?
There are a lot of people in our communities that are doing great work. And we have to make sure that we float that activity into them, whether they do it or not. The thing is, we have to get something that they're going to be interested in. We have to pique their interest and then guide them away from the negativity. And so while we did it with sports, we did it with construction, we do it in Park Heights with development, we do it with that. That's just us. I said there are a lot of ways that we can begin to stem that tide. This is a new day where mentorship has a different face. This is not the same type. We can't sit guys in a room and say we're going to mentor them, and then we have to be hands-on. And then a lot of that activity, it's got to be hands-on. It's got to show them something versus tell them something. And that's what they're missing. They're missing the show them something. How are you going to tell me to be successful when you're not successful? How are you going to tell me to do something that you haven't done and you aren't willing to do? And so that's what they're missing. So when guys tell them, hey, I want you to do this, and you can be all you can be, but you haven't been the best that you can be. And so we become a reflection of our own situations. And when we tell these young men, and mostly young men, when we tell these mostly young men that this is what you need to do, but we're not showing them how to do it, we're doing them a disservice. All we're doing is talking, and they're very smart. You know, they see BS coming. So if you haven't been in their situation or been in their situation, you can't tell them this is how this is going to be, because you haven't been in their shoes.
Right.
Quay, we're talking about parenting. We're talking about today, Baltimore, young men. We're talking about rap lyrics, talking about fatherhood. It was noted earlier how some fathers have been pushed out of the child's life. You are the father. You have among your family a 15-year-old daughter. Is she influenced by rap music?
Very much so. Very much so. We were the product of hip hop. I think part of the challenge, we're the first generation of hip hop parents, where we grew up. We were the generation that created NWA. We were the generation that created gangster rap. We have to acknowledge our role in this, and we can't abandon the post because we no longer fit the demographic that's being described in the art. But we did the same thing. I was part of hip hop movement. I produced hip hop music. I was a DJ. The same lyrics that make me cringe, I listen back to where we were at that point. I think the only thing that we really understood that I think they miss is we could identify fantasy versus reality a little better. I don't think they really grasp that these are not the lifestyles that these artists are portraying. And I think that's the parents' role. I can't put that on the artists. We don't see Sylvester Stallone, after making a Rambo movie, have to sit and explain to white kids that he really doesn't walk around with a machine gun and gun people down. But so then we take young men who listen to Jeezy say trap or die, but send his kids to private schools and encourage his kids to go to Ivy League schools, but tell our kids to trap and sell drugs in our community.
So it's an industry. It's an industry that's requiring our young black men, young black women artists to say the most decadent things about the black community. I think it was Dr. Francis Cress Welsing said that we are the only race that calls our women B's, HOs, and expect respect in the process. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, noted psychiatrist.
You know, is it the fact that we
no other race calls their women B's and HOs in their arts and music and film?
Understood, but no other community would allow such to be said and not be offended. So is it that we have a palette for this, which is why the art sells, or is it that that's all we're pushing? We can't make the argument that the only product that we produce out of our community entertainment wise is what we call the hood factor.
It's not.
It's not. It's just there's an overwhelming demand for it. And unfortunately, the demand for it actually goes beyond the black community.
Yeah. Yeah, Jay Wyndal, I've been hearing these.
They historically love the coonery. It's just another minstrel show. You know, hip hop has become that. And now it's profitable So therefore, the people who are the artists can justify it. But also, I have to attribute that to the business community. When growing up, I didn't see the business people visible, like Will was saying. So I think a lot of young people, I think what we lack in our community is a lack of creativity, where we only aspire to things that we've seen modeled. I start to notice that we jump on trends. If one person sells real estate, then we all see an opportunity in real estate. Everybody wants to do real estate. If we're opening assisted livings, there's a wave of everyone opening assisted livings. We tend to do what we call in soccer, the younger kids, when they don't understand how to play, they bunch around the ball. Everyone runs to the ball and just gathers around the ball, kicking the same ball, and nothing moves. We don't spread out into other sectors.
Jay Wyndal, I know you only have like 4 minutes. You care to comment on that?
I agree with it, and I'm listening to it because he's saying everything that I agree with. So I don't have any.
One comment from the comment section. Nicole says that young women call each other bees today with pride. Back in our day, if you called a woman a bee, expect a fight. A brother's going to show up. But Jay Wyndal, today, what's normal is now abnormal. What's abnormal is now accepted as normal.
Yeah. I've been seeing that and noticing that, and I cringe. I cringe at the sound of the N-word. And some of my clients, they use the N-word so fluently, and I don't even want to correct them because I understand the bigger point that they're trying to make. But it's just we have found acceptable those things that are derogatory, and it's not advancing us as a people. No matter
how do we reverse it?
You just have to state your ground about how you feel about it. Now, when I say, I don't use that word, people tend to not use it around me, or they say, oh yeah, my bad. And they respect it. They're not going to, if you tell them that you're uncomfortable with a word, they're not going to continue to use that word around you. At least they'll make a conscious effort to try not to. So we just have to assert that, certain things that are being said, we find them, damnable. And we don't tend to want to be around, the use of that type of language. And we just
do you think our rappers are minstrels?
I'm trying to stay open-minded and keep them as artists, but some of the art I don't agree with, but that's just art is in the eye of the beholder. I really don't like putting labels, especially that type of label on our artists. I do see some of their work as not advancing our society or our culture, but I believe in the First Amendment. I'm a real First Amendment proponent, so I'd have to be very.
So were those Trump supporters.
Well, no, they were rioters. They were violent insurrectionists. That's not exercising the First Amendment. Those are criminal acts. So,
but they saw that as their freedom.
I'm sorry.
But Donnie was saying they saw that as their freedom.
But that's not freedom. You don't have freedom to destroy. That's not exercising the First Amendment right.
So then the question is, who's defining freedom? And what level of consciousness are we promoting so that people will be on the same accord?
Well, I think we got laws against that. We got laws against rioting. We got laws against sedition and insurrection.
Right. So then what are the laws that are in place that would guide us in terms of this kind of language being used and the way that it influences us?
Look, people have found the N-word to be endearing. I don't necessarily want to take their word away from them. I hope I'm not speaking with a forked tongue. I just don't want it to be used on me or necessarily around me. And I have greater control about it being used on me than I do about it being used around me. And I assert my control when it's used on me. But sometimes even people with the greatest intentions will use that word on me. I was just dealing with a client the other day, and he's just going through it. And it's just part of his vernacular. And I just didn't even have the heart to correct him. It made me cringe. Every time I heard it, I didn't have the heart to correct him because the bigger issue wasn't the word. The bigger issue is the tribulation that he's experiencing. So I was trying to be, sympathetic to that. And yeah, it bothered me. It does bother me.
Jay Wyndal, I know you got to go. It's 10:45. You want to put a plug in?
I'm trying to do something. I'm going to try to hang up the funeral right here. I can watch it and stay on this conversation.
Okay. Can I ask you a question real quick? Do you feel that the N-word does accurately describe a certain segment of the Black community?
No.
Because they embrace it. Not because I think what they're trying to do I remember Nas brought up he was going to name one of his albums the N word, and the goal that this group has was to basically disempower the word by redefining it. Do you think that's possible? Do you think a group should embrace that label?
No
Can
more.
you take something negative and make it positive? I mean, really,
I think. I'm sorry.
That's the intention. That's the premise. That's the
Can
way.
apply that in other areas. I mean, when you think about fighting, okay, so we gonna beat you down in order so that you understand that this is a normal thing, but that's not okay.
Correct.
I can't see them embracing that any more than I can see us embracing the Confederate flag. You know what I mean?
I agree.
You see people try, I just don't buy it, So that's how I feel about it.
Well, Hanna, with the loud phone, what are your thoughts? Well,
is that me done? Well, I think that when you hear young women calling each other, I mean, they said just blatantly, just out like, that's my B, that's my it's that. When you hear guys like Jay Wyndal was saying, and they use it as it's just a part of their dialogue every day, every sentence. I mean, it's almost every sentence that you hear them talk is every sentence. And so I think and I'm brought to this point. I remember in the 80s when we used to say things and we used to rap and we used to think, and people thought that we were crazy and out of our mind at the time. And because our parents grew up listening to the Temptations and the Supremes, so our rap at that time was crazy. And so now we've just seen the evolution of the time. It's the same scenario. It's just the time. It's just the music has evolved. The times have evolved, but the situation is the same. The same thing that we're just the older ones in the room now, and now we think that their music is crazy. The same way our parents thought that our music was crazy in the 80s.
Our music was crazy,
and it's just different. Yeah, right. So the same thing, we thought Public Enemy, like my parents would never let me listen. They thought Public Enemy was crazy. They thought they were radical. They thought it was crazy. They was like, how can y'all listen to that stuff? Now we're saying the same thing because now we're the 50-year-olds in the room saying, you know what? Y'all music is crazy, it's radical, it's the same thing. So where a lot of us ended up turning out being okay as a result of it because there was a different blend of some positivity in music and a different blend of what you saw in the neighborhood. What we're seeing now is just the generational difference between what's now happening in the neighborhood that has been a negative. It didn't grow into positive. When you had people that were on drugs and shooting in the 80s, it just got worse. So you don't expect those situations to get better if you don't fix the root cause of it. And so we never got to the point of where we fixed the root cause of it.
Let me tell you the one thing in today's music that really baffles me, and that's people rapping about drinking Robitussin and popping perks. I don't understand why you're rapping about something that you don't do, as if it's cool. Well, anyway, what's going on with the city of Baltimore, Will? How's this mayor doing?
It's yet to be determined. I will say this. I think that if we're in use of his words and going by the science of things, I think the business community is dying right now because of I think what may be a bad policy in closing some restaurants and things like that. And if you're going by science and numbers, I understand the point of it is you want to keep people safe. We always want to do that. But I think if your driving force in that is going by the numbers and the science, then look at Baltimore County and the numbers are the same. So you don't get that same thing. You're just killing killing the community. And people aren't, and it's not like it stopped people from going out. They're just going to Baltimore County. That's all. They're not stopping going out. Not going out in Baltimore.
Did you know this young man who recently got killed that was affiliated with Safe Streets?
Taylor, yeah, I've known Taylor for about 20 years. And
what happened there?
He had his issues. He had his issues when we were younger. I remember down Lexington Terrace when he was a kid, and all those kinds of stuff, and even up in Park Heights, and he was a good dude. He turned his life around. He was a good dude, and really appreciated a lot of his work. But I think a lot of it went underappreciated while he was alive, and people made and sensationalized it in his death.
There's some questions as to how and why he got killed early on a Sunday morning. Not that it matters when you get killed, but there's a lot of talk and a lot of people have spoken up. Phil Lee from Johns Hopkins, also Melvin Russell, former cop. Okay.
Well, there is some issue, but you got to look at also the activity of Safe Streets. Safe Streets is designed to work in clandestine times. It's designed to work in the middle of the night, and supposedly to that. I've never been a proponent or a supporter of Safe Streets because I didn't see its effectiveness because I kept seeing 300 some murders every year, and I didn't see any that was stopped. So I wasn't a supporter of it, but I appreciated the work or the attempt at what some of the guys were doing, not necessarily what the policy was.
Quay, how's the city of Baltimore doing?
I think Mayor Scott is concerned about the people. And I think if anyone is concerned about the people first, I commend that. I think there's no easy decision to make in a pandemic. And if I understand the profitability of the restaurants and how the restaurant industry may be impacted. But if you look at the carryout business, businesses across the country, statistically, businesses are not doing a lot less because they're not doing inside dining. So I'm not in disagreement with them. I would say that maybe some more incentives could have been offered, or some more explanation could have been offered on why shutting things down, why he felt a need to shut things down. But overall, I think he had to get people off the streets. People were going way too far. You're seeing people in nightclubs on Facebook, no mask, hanging out as if Corona's not real. And our community is the main one impacted. And I think you can't deny the fact that Baltimore City has a high concentration of African Americans, and we're affected and infected at a much higher rate. So,
Jay Wyndal, how's the city of Baltimore?
I think the city of Baltimore is moving in the right direction. I agree with Quay. I agree with the mayor. I mean, we've been in a society where business was more important than human beings. And in this particular case, we have a mayor who actually cares about the people. Hogan is coming out with $1 billion stimulus package, so that I'm sure there's help is on the way. And quite frankly, I'd rather see my mother and my grandmother and Miss Jones down the street survive than some restaurant that wasn't owned by us anyway. I mean, you know, we got carryouts, you know what I mean? And if we had a sit down restaurant, it was converted to a carryout. So, and not to seem selfish or biased in favor of ours, but when these people put their profits over people, I don't have that much sympathy for them. And that's just how I feel. Baltimore has the fourth largest amount of corona deaths. We have a high amount of corona cases. It's been affecting us. People are talking about they don't want to take the virus. They don't want to pull the mask up. I mean, come on, what you going to do? I think he's being responsible. This is a responsible mayor, and I understand that businesses are hurting, but we all got to get creative, and we've had the time to do it. So we just have to, we have to make the adjustment. It's not going to be business as usual in a pandemic, and that's just what it is.
Jay Wyndal, earlier you alluded to your fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi. I am reminded that the city council president is your fraternity brother.
No, he's not. He's a Q.
Oh, my bad. Well, this should make this question a little easier for you. Nick Mosby is suggesting that the city of Baltimore hires 7 analysts to the tune of $700,000 to find out where the money is being spent.
I don't oppose that. He's been able to see how the city works, not only from the city, but also from the state capitol. He's been able to see how the state of Maryland runs their things, and I think he can.
$700,000.
Yeah, but if you're covering millions and millions of dollars, then it'll be worth it. Let's give him a chance. If it doesn't work,
$2.3 million. Go down there and get that money. Make them pay today.
Talk to Will about it. I would defer to Will, but the way I see it, if that money is being spent to uncover the millions and millions of dollars that we've been losing over the years, I don't have a problem with it.
$700,000 in a pandemic when the city is broke.
How many people can $700,000 pay? are they really going to pay for these types of experts? 7?
Jay Wyndal, I don't know if you have any experience with
Right.
if you have any experience with the child support system, but I guarantee you can get 2 of them child support ladies down there, and they will have that money found by 12 noon. Will Hanna, you wanted to say something, you on your loud phone.
But
It's not your fault.
Here's my opinion on that. If one
If
thing,
he let it go,
it doesn't take a whole lot. It doesn't take $700,000 to find. I tell you what, you can pay somebody 10 grand, they can find where all the money at in Baltimore. That's also why you have a comptroller. That's why you have an office of audits. That's why you have all of that works in it. So
why you need 700,000 when you got a comptroller?
You gotta have an independent, objective opinion. Someone who's going in with fresh eyes, who is not biased.
I've been saying this for the last 15 years that the city needs to have independent audit. We had 70-some million disappear in Park Heights. So that's just Park Heights, and we know where that money is. We don't need 7 million people to tell you where it is. I can tell you where it is. You know,
where did it go? Where did it go?
If you pay $700,000, I can pay a whole bunch of people in Park Heights, and then we can go find the money. We know where the money at.
If you know where the money at,
to hire more people to work down at City Hall to do absolutely nothing, which is what we've seen. I appreciate what the mayor has said when he opposed this move. You know, because we don't need to find out. What we need is more accountability from the comptroller's office. What we need is more accountability from housing. What we need is more accountability from the heads of all of these departments. And so going and making some wholesale changes there and having the inspector general become my best friend in Baltimore right now, because she's the one uncovering where the money is. You know, so you don't need 700,000. All you need is I think if you fully staff the inspector general's office and you get the audits and you get auditors to work in there, and then you get independent audits, as Kavette was saying, I think that now you begin to hold some people accountable, and you'll see some people leave the city government as a result of that accountability.
Yeah. Quay, isn't the truth of the matter is Nick is looking for Brandon to slip, and as soon as he slips, he'll show up the same way Brandon showed up every time we would see Jack Young. Every time you saw Jack Young, you see Brandon stick his head up in the back.
I don't know about that. I couldn't even begin to try to say what his agenda would be. I mean, I just think that of course, but I think there has to be a balance, and there has to be a level of ambition there. Obviously,
you pay a school CEO $350,000 a year for an underperforming school system.
Well, let's look at it. If your school district is underperforming, do you need the best talent to turn it around, or do you need the mediocre talent? And
they were about to send her to run the Department of Education for the country. So I'm just trying to understand the logic in here. I'm not understanding.
See, when you're competing against the private sector, the salaries are going to have to, they're going to have to be competitive. So,
but what do we get for top dollar? When you go into Nordstrom's and you pay top dollar, you're not looking for something from Marshall's.
I think it's what we're paying for is the experience in executing, and that's not going to come cheap. So if you're talking about a school system administrator at a C-suite level, that I don't see that. I don't see that being $100,000 position.
Jay Wyndal, would you pay a new police commissioner $350,000?
I'm sorry?
Would you pay a new police commissioner $350,000, $375,000?
No, I don't think I would do that, because I got
a better question. One last question, I'm gonna shut up. Will Hanna, Port Covington got all of this money, and now Port Covington got all that money, the city council, the mayor. What are you on a Play-Doh phone?
I can't hear you. I couldn't hear you, Don.
We can't hear you. Port Covington, what's up with Port Covington? Frank like he's about to go lose his mind. What's up with Port Covington?
Well, everything you got. I mean, we gave what, a $5 billion TIF down there. You know, so I mean, we got to look at where we're spending money. We're not spending money in our neighborhoods. We're not spending money in West Baltimore. We're not making those same investments in Park Heights and East Baltimore. We're making those investments downtown. We're making them in safe neighborhoods, or safe invested neighborhoods, instead of taking on the real challenge of changing our neighborhoods and turning them around. So we're not making those investments. We're not spending $5 billion to build up a new Harbor East in West Baltimore, because that's what it did. They spent $5 billion to build up Harbor East. They're doing the same thing in Port Covington. Going to run the same amount of people out of Cherry Hill. Watch that come in 5 years. You know, and same thing in Madison Park. Same thing that happened in McCullough Homes. We're going to see all of those areas where we've seen our communities, people of color live in those neighborhoods. They're going to be gone because we have not held them accountable to investing in our neighborhoods. And so you're seeing all of that money, $5 billion here, $5 billion there. They throw around billions like it's thousands. And that's what's happening. But those billions aren't in our neighborhoods. And so that's where the accountability comes in. When we see people walking around saying, well, I want to help Baltimore, and I don't care what elected official they are. I've seen, and I'll say this, I've seen Nick Mosby go from a councilman to a delegate to city council president and represent my district, and hadn't seen nothing change in my district in 10 years. So I said it. But those are the things that we need to hold people accountable for, that we ascend up in their body of work.
Kevette King, your final thoughts. Powerful show today.
Absolutely. I appreciate all of the thoughts that were shared from our young men and the encouragement that they need to receive to our small businesses in Baltimore. I've received some really encouraging information as Senator Van Halen was talking about how we're going to receive Van Hollen, I'm sorry, thank you.
Van Halen is a white
I know. I saw a magazine with Van Halen on it yesterday, so it's in my head. The influence. Senator Van Hollen was talking about how there's going to be subsidies for small businesses to encourage employment. And so my encouragement to Baltimore, especially to the small businesses in Baltimore, is to prepare ourselves for being able to employ more people, for being able to grow. So, when we look at what we're going to do, this $2,000 stimulus looks like it's going to be real coming up soon. Are you going to take that money and blow it, or are you going to save that money and invest it? And that is what is the most important. How are we being an example for the young people in our community so that they can have hope?
Quay Parker, your final thoughts.
Final thoughts is that this next generation, I'm optimistic about. They haven't made all the right choices, but they also have not adhered to the boundaries that we adhere to. They're realizing that they have a lot more freedoms, their voice can be heard, and they're just looking for inspiration. So if I can say anything, I would just say that I am very optimistic about this next generation. I'm actively helping several young people, young entrepreneurs who I know are going to do great things. And I encourage everyone to just look at the ones who are trying to do, even the ones who may have be outward bound. And Wyndal, you'd probably be better qualified to speak to this than anyone else. A lot of these guys on the streets have brilliant business minds. They just weren't presented with constructive opportunities to use these skills and these talents in a constructive way. So yes, I think that right now, the future of Baltimore is in making sure that our youth have as many options in front of them. And we're not just presenting school and the college route as the only way to succeed, because we know there are a lot of options out here. I think we just need to get as many of those out there as possible.
I think everybody should go to college. Ms. Stewart says, with regards to the school system, the superintendent's children should be required to attend a school within the system so that the leader has a vested interest in the system, skin in the game. I totally agree. Jay Wyndal Gordon, your final thoughts, and thank you for joining us, the Warrior Lawyer.
Thank you. Look, Donnie, my people were here to teach the world, not take lessons. That's my final thought. Let's do that.
Ooh.
Okay. Will Hanna, your final thought.
My final thought is each of us have a responsibility in our neighborhoods. I'm hoping that we sent 10 guys to college this year. I'm hoping to send another 50 this year. I'm hoping that we can influence these young people through sport, through whatever mechanisms that we can use. So that's my final thought.
Okay, good deal. It's been a powerful show. Kevette, your final thought? Anything you want to
Just I guess from what you guys have said, what I've taken away is really understanding that honestly, it's about education, and whether you go to college or not, it's about being educated. You take an opportunity to read, you take an opportunity to learn, you take an opportunity to be mentored. Get the education however you can.
My thing is no excuses. Just like we have all of these social media, we can learn a TikTok dance or an Instagram dance. We can learn how to go and find a career, a future, a life. We can tackle a J. Wyndal Gordon. You can call him. He's in the phone book. You got smartphones. Google J. Wyndal Gordon. You want to be a lawyer? Call J. Wyndal Gordon. You want to get into real estate? Call Quay Parker. You want to get into community development or sports or entertainment? Call Will Hanna. Seek these people out. No excuses. Up to date, down tomorrow. Do your day and everything will follow. Nothing to it but to do it. I got to do it, regardless of how I feel. I am somebody. I am my brother's keeper. Good morning, Baltimore.
Good morning, Baltimore.
All right.